For me, entrepreneurs are my people. I've found my way to entrepreneurship a little later in life, but I feel like we are sort of the uplifters of things. Josh earlier talked a little bit about taking his tech skill set and moving that into climate tech. I think taking those traditional skill sets that we have as entrepreneurs and moving those into these impactful areas is an opportunity that we all have. I think here at an Impact Conference, we recognize that opportunity, but I want to talk a little bit about how we can lean into that opportunity a little bit more. How many of you, so remembering that energy, how many of you read about a racially motivated mass shooting in the morning and kind of want to go back to bed? Yeah. So I want to address a little bit of what was said earlier about will and us needing to bring the will to these things and talk about how we might engage with these things with that same energy we talked about earlier, addressing our companies with. I believe that we are, and some of this came to light during COVID, we're all walking around in a state of grief. We're not lacking will. We are literally grieving. Whether we're stuck in a state of denial about these things, whether we're in a place of anger about racism or climate change, whether we're bargaining and trying to sort of take the next easiest action and see the problem go away, or whether we're just outright depressed. We're walking around. I wrote a letter shortly after George Floyd was murdered to a population I count myself among called the quietly bothered. And it's this quiet state of grief that we sort of push down and pretend like it's not there so we can get out the door every day and do whatever it is we have to do and get back home. I was ripped out of that state on the day I learned of George Floyd's murder and the whole incident with Christian Cooper in Central Park. I learned about it that same day. I was in my office at work, and I got very good at compartmentalizing that uplifters mindset that I took to work with all the vigor that was needed and ready to address any problem, and sort of this quietly bothered state. So I pushed down things like racism, pushed down things like the climate crisis in order to sort of get in the door. That day, it got ripped up. It all came up, and I sort of spent the next week in this malaise. And we do this one-word check-in at the company I was running at the time, Enzo Wealth. And my the one word that I could sort of muster up the courage to say was distracted. And I was shocked to hear the voices on the other. I was, by the way, I'm the one Black person in the company, and so I was feeling somewhat alone at this time, feeling like I was dealing with this by myself. And there was this chorus of voices that basically said, us too, one after another. I went on to launch something called the Just Listen Project, where we set out to heal racism by growing empathy through these very interpersonal conversations across racial lines, first starting between Black and white people. We did Black and white women, and then across, with people from the Asian and Pacific Islander community. When that came up, the strange thing about that, so I essentially took a sabbatical and did that for several months, and then was asked to talk about that experience. I started to talk to companies about that, and one asked me to talk about that experience. The surprising and bizarre thing about engaging with the grief and the pain that I felt most acutely was how uplifted I personally felt on the other side. And so I was asked to talk about that experience to a company actually in the Reno Tahoe area called Ridgeline. And we did this 5-part series where I essentially reverse engineered what set of engagement tools, mental, social, emotional engagement tools that I brought. And I realized it's the same toolkit that so many entrepreneurs, our investors, entrepreneurs turned investors are bringing to these companies every day in order to meet challenges that seem like they may be unsolvable, whether that's building a piece of technology, whether that's addressing a market that doesn't know it needs your product yet. And so I wanted to run through those very quickly those tools that I have found useful, and then sort of close with a micro ask and a micro give exercise that has become a practice of the company where I am now. And so essentially, those tools are leaning, hoping, chasing, and acting, or stretching and acting. The leaning part of that is, as entrepreneurs, we are conditioned to lean into the hard stuff. We do that with business problems. We have not, with the same success or consistency, brought that leaning into the hard stuff to problems of impact that impact on a global scale. And so when I'm talking about leaning into the hard stuff, the first piece of that is acknowledging and normalizing the grief that we are all feeling. And instead of going back to bed, actually acknowledging one of the authors of the 5 stages of grief, David Kessler, talks about this 6th stage of finding meaning. But prior to that 6th stage, in order to process grief, he says the first step to finding meaning is stopping on that 5th stage of acceptance. Daniel Pink recently wrote a book called The Power of Regret. And that book talks about the quality of action and the difference of clarity that comes when we actually acknowledge the regret that we hold for certain things. We all collectively own climate change, and we can collectively regret what we've done, and doing that is a necessary step to get to the next sort of right action on climate change. Same for racism, same for global conflict. And so sitting in that place and feeling into regret and grief is a necessary part to moving out of that stuff. And so for me, what I found to be helpful in doing that is actually leaning into the hard stuff around the problem that I felt most acutely. And so I would encourage, an impact list was given earlier. I would say it's a little bit longer. We talk about 9 impact themes at Uplifting Capital that go from people, planet, and money, but it's all the problems that you've heard. I mean, it's justice, diversity, equity, inclusion, it's education, it's health and wellness, it's climate change, it's food systems, financial inclusion, affordable housing, all of these things. And there's one of these problems that you probably feel more acutely than the other. Don't run from that. Don't go back to bed. Lean into that problem. The second piece that I would share is the courage to hope. That's not the lofty hoping something gets better without action. That's the entrepreneurial kind of hope. So 10x thinking that says, if I think about a solution that is 10 times better than what I currently see in front of me today, I know that's going to create a better, more creative form of action than if I incrementally go toward a solution in terms of my vision. That form of hope. Angela Duckworth, in her book Grit, talks about this idea of learned optimism, and it was written about first by Marty Seligman, famous positive psychologist. And part of that kind of hope, that entrepreneurial kind of hope, is believing that the actions that we take have the ability to affect the problems that are in front of us, and that includes some of these existential problems. The belief that we can actually affect the problem is an essential part of motivating us to take action on those problems. So the courage to hope, leaning into the hard stuff and the courage to hope. Entrepreneurs have both of those in spades. The third part would be stretching versus chasing. And these are all, I'm ripping all this stuff from business books, by the way, because all these tools are the same tools. An author, Scott Sonnenschein, writes about this concept of stretching versus chasing. And he does all these studies, most in the business context, about how companies that stretch the resources that they have in front of them and constrain those resources and believe that those resources are adequate to affect the problems that they need to address have done far better and solve problems far more effectively than companies that take the mindset of needing to chase new resources in order to address the problems. This idea that we have everything we need in front of us to solve the crises we need to solve individually, that you have everything you need in front of you to address whatever problem you feel most acutely, is a necessary piece of the mindset to create the will to address those problems. And then the last piece that I'll offer and let you get to lunch is this idea of acting. And so we call these micro acts of courage. Acting small. I think the fancy way it's said in James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, is the aggregation of marginal gains. And I would say when we're talking about impacting existential problems, I would throw the exponential aggregation of marginal gains. And so what that means is these 1% changes. If you take these 1% actions, and in this case, when we're talking about impacting these hard problems, I think 1% actions or micro acts of courage can be thought of as getting 1% further outside of your comfort zone. And so if we talk about taking these 1% actions, the idea is that we become the kind of people who take these actions, and the compounding of those actions creates a much bigger effect than that small action you start with. So that's on an individual and sort of temporal level. But when we're talking about existential problems that affect us all, the aggregation of those actions also happens across people. And so there's an element of hope there, and there's an element of belief there that acting small and taking those 1% actions on these big problems is going to get us there. And it's the bias toward action that entrepreneurs are naturally conditioned to have. In the vein of that bias to action, one of the practices that we do, so Uplifting Capital does themed dinners on different impact themes that we offer to financial advisors and investors. We recently did a justice dinner, and one of the things that we did there that's going to be a practice that we carry forward is leaving people with a micro ask and a micro give. And so going around the room and having everybody bring to mind something that would be a very small lift for them, but may be impactful to the people across from them, or impactful to the issue that they want to affect. And then a micro ask, something that you think may be a small lift for others, but could be impactful to you as you set about your mission. And so I would ask you all, or offer you all, the practice as you walk around and meet people and shake hands and network, to take with you that practice of micro ask and micro give. What's a small lift for you that might be helpful to someone else in this room? And what's something that you think may be small to someone else in this room that would be really impactful to you? I think the quality of that exercise really sort of did something for us. I want to offer my own micro ask and my micro give from the stage. So I don't know if you guys noticed, but I'm Black, and I'm here in Marin. That was a close call for our family, actually. So Enzo Wealth is in Petaluma, and when we were deciding, I was making this transition to Uplifting Capital, and we were talking about where we were going to set up a business, where we were going to go. I'm from LA. I practiced law in LA for a number of years. I have a network there, so we strongly considered going to LA. But we lived in Corte Madera before we went up to Petaluma, and the embrace of me back when I was a lawyer in Petaluma, in Corte Madera, the inclusivity of Marin, the quality of people, and actually the business community here in Marin led us to the decision to move down to San Rafael and set up our business in San Rafael. I can tell you from a business standpoint, that's probably been the best decision I've ever made. So yeah, absolutely. Our major investors are in Marin, all five. So we have, I'm happy to say we're 60% women in our company, and Black-led company that came to Marin. All are from Marin. Our Sarah's from Petaluma. I feel like Jessica Carner is here from Hanson Bridget. She's here in Marin. Hanson Bridget gave us a grant that got us started with our company when Uplifting Capital was an idea. And so I believed in Marin. I didn't believe in the diversity of Marin, frankly, but I did believe in the inclusivity of Marin. I continue to believe. I will stay here. I will fight to make Marin what I want it to be. And so that's my micro give. I'm bullish on Marin going where it needs to go from a diversity standpoint, and I already have seen the results of its inclusion. My micro ask is that you engage. So not only me as an entrepreneur here and sicking me on your financial advisors and whoever else will hear what I have to say, but other underrepresented founders. The inclusivity, the open arms of this community have made our business viable. Literally, our office space came from someone in my network. I talked about our investors. I do walks every Sunday with another founder here in Marin, Deep Ubi, at the farmers market in San Rafael. The community here has the opportunity to thrive. It's easier to engage people that look like us, but going out of your way to engage with founders who may not feel as comfortable or may not see founders who look like them here, it's meaningful. It's meaningful, and it actually can make or break a business. I can attest to that. And so my micro ask would be that you engage those people. Thank you for spending your time with me. Enjoy your lunch.